I'm Matthew, I'm 22, I'm from East Sussex and I identify as a gay man. I was always quite self-conscious about it being obvious that I was a gay man and people reading just from meeting me that I was gay without me actually saying as such. And so I was always wondering, is this the right thing to wear? Is this the wrong thing to wear? And when I was about 15, my dad turned to me in the car and he said, "Oh, your brother, Edward, he's got a piercing and he's bleached his hair. Now, Ed is also gay." And he was obviously quite concerned that he'd started to show these kind of physical traits. And so that made me feel kind of quite uncomfortable and like I wanted to dress in a way that was much more, I guess you might like say straight and less obviously like camp. I was always conscious about it. And I remember like even if I'd go into a shop, there might be an item that I would like and I'd take it off the rack and I'd try it on, but I might not buy it because I'd consider it to be like too gay. It was like had too many sequins or the colour was too bright or there was something about it that I thought would give me away as gay to somebody else without me actually having said that to them. But I finished university recently and there were 2 whole bin bags of clothes that I gave to the charity shop because I just didn't wear them anymore because my style throughout that period had just shifted into like a much more me style. Some people would say a campus style. And I always used to be quite self-conscious about my voice, and so I would deliberately lower the pitch of my voice if I met certain people, if I had certain exchanges, particularly with men who I thought, were quite masculine. I would lower my voice or make sure that something didn't sound as effeminate as it otherwise might do, especially if I'm getting enthusiastic about something, then I can get more high-pitched or effeminate. And so I'd always try and rein that in consciously. I think now I'm much more confident, and so I'd be really happy with them being able to look at me and go, "Oh, Matthew is probably gay," and then reading those signifiers as positive, but it took a long time for that to be the case. So, like many other young LGBT people, I haven't had the best mental health at various points in the past. Mostly anxiety and depression. Those were the main 2 things that impacted me, especially during the time I was coming out all the way up until kind of my 2nd year of university. And at times it was really difficult to even talk about those things. And there were times when I thought, it would be better if I weren't gay because then maybe my mental health would be better. Maybe I'd be a happier person. Maybe I wouldn't be depressed anymore. Maybe I wouldn't be anxious. And thankfully I got through it. I have amazing friends who were so supportive. I was able to talk to a counsellor about it, and not everything worked. It was a process of trial and error, of trying something one time and then maybe it worked for a bit and then maybe it didn't, but I just had to keep going and working to improve my mental health. And then eventually I got there, and I'm so proud and pleased to say today that I am a young gay man who has suffered with depression and anxiety, but that's very much in the past, and I feel stronger for having had those experiences. I'm now proud to have gone through those things, and there's no way on earth now that I would not want to be LGBT. So the most helpful thing for me with my mental health is I made my social media private. I stopped posting so much. There were times when I deliberately wouldn't drink, for example, and my friends would go out to a club and I'd say, actually, no, I have to stay at home. I went to counselling and I started going to the gym and exercising a lot and meditation as well. So this is the thing, it's a composite. There's no one thing that works for everybody. There wasn't just one magic cure for me either. And it's something I have to maintain to make sure I don't slip back into those old habits and those negative ways of thinking. It's a constant thing I have to check in with myself and just to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Whilst I was at university, I found myself in a really liberal, accepting environment, which allowed me to explore my identity as a gay man without prejudice, and I was able to find like-minded people and people who were LGBT or people who were LGBT allies, and it was super accepting, and that was amazing. It was really great. But when you leave those environments, because university environments can be quite closed bubbles, when you leave them, then you have to go back into sometimes situations which aren't so accepting. I mean, where I come from is quite a small rural town. When I first moved back, I was like, oh, are they looking at me? No, of course they're not. And then it kept happening. And then I realized they were looking at me, you know, because there was something that they had identified about the way I moved or the way I dressed or spoke. There was something which had signified to them that I was different in some way. And because it's such a small place, there aren't that many people who are visibly different. If you're in London or somewhere, you know, you get all kinds of people on the street, but it's not the same in East Sussex. And I've had, you know, remarks made on the street. I've had people use like homophobic language in my workplace. So that's actually quite difficult to deal with sometimes if you're getting it on a regular basis. But the thing is, whenever I encounter them, I've now, you know, had that so much that now I just kind of smile and I genuinely feel kind of inquisitive and like, I just wish I could say to them, right, so I've got like half an hour free now. Can I buy you a coffee? Like, can we go down the road and we'll just sit down, I'll get your latte and we'll just have a chat about this. And I'm not going to try and change your mind. I'm going to ask you some questions because I really want to know like what they're thinking and like what that thought process is. And then also maybe if they sit down with an LGBT person and they realize that, you know, we can both have coffee and we can chat about similar things and like what's happened on EastEnders last week, then we might find some common ground and it might not be so alien. But even if not, then I've just learned something about their unique perspective on LGBT people. But yeah, I've not been in a situation where I have been able to do that yet, but I hope to be able to do it because I think it would be really interesting. Unfortunately, there have been incidents that I've actually experienced homophobia in quite like a personal and violent ways. So usually it's happened when I've been more visibly queer, you know, so I used to have like bleach blonde hair, for example, or when I've spoken in a particularly effeminate way. I remember I was actually at a service station with my friend and I was just ordering something from the counter. Two boys behind me had picked up the fact that I was speaking in what they thought was quite an effeminate way. And they said, oh, are you gay? And I said, yeah, I am, because personally, I don't want anybody, however much they're trying to intimidate me, I never ever want to deny who I am to them. So unless I feel like there's a really imminent threat to my safety, I will never say, no, I'm not gay, because then to me, that allows them to win. That allows them to make me deny who I am, something which is really important to me. So I turned around and said, yeah, I am. Have you got a problem with that? And then he stopped interacting with me, but started interacting with his friend and with the man who was behind them in the queue and started saying, oh, what about it, lads? Like 3 against 2. And my friend Tom was stood there like really quite scared. Then I just looked at my friend and was like, you know, don't say anything, don't respond, don't give it the oxygen. And also I think that if you are LGBT, you have to be quite careful sometimes, especially if you're somewhere late at night or if you're in an isolated area, you have to put your own safety first. So my parents had quite different reactions, particularly when I was very young, when I was about 5 years old, to the thought that I might be a gay man. My mum has said this before. When my dad found out that she was pregnant with twins and that we were both boys, he imagined that he was going to have a football team, but what he got was a kick line. And it meant that I didn't quite meet his expectations of what he thought it meant to be having a son. And that can be quite difficult at times, and that's put some strain on our relationship. And when I was little, I loved playing with Barbie. I thought that she was like the best thing ever. And I often used to dress up as well. And I'd wear dresses and stuff. And I was drawn to all of these toys that were quite feminine. And he played a lot of sport and he was very active. He played cricket every weekend. And I remember being very young and being confused because I was allowed to play with my Barbie, but only in the car. She couldn't leave the car. And at the time I was angry about it, but I couldn't work out why, because it didn't make sense to me. And then as an adult, I've been able to go, oh, because maybe he was embarrassed about that. I think also part of it was him wanting to protect me and worrying about what his mates would say. And I think he was also trying to shield me from the homophobia that I might experience even as young as 5 years old. So that was quite tricky. But my mum, when she found out that this was a rule, was furious. She was really angry at him, and she has always been amazing. She was one that bought us the Barbie dolls. He never would. And I mean, she sent me to school for World Book Day dressed as like Snow White once, which is pretty awesome. Like, I'm not sure that many other mums would allow their sons to do that. And although the other kids in the playground thought it was really weird that I was playing with a Barbie, I was totally happy. And so I was allowed to be myself by my mum, but not with my dad. And so I think subsequently my relationship with her has been much better than with him. But she's extraordinary, and it's so important that she's in my life because I've always had an ally, like right there, who's been able to support me through really difficult things. I think that now I'm older, my relationship with my dad is better. And it's taken a while, but he has made an effort, you know. He's met boyfriends that I've had, you know, and he might make a comment occasionally, you know. He'll see me wearing something, or like there'll be something on TV and he'll make a comment about it, you know, being gay. He still thinks that it's different, but I think that he's accepted now that he hasn't got a football team, that he has got a kick line. And I think that he loves me like very much. We don't talk about a lot of LGBT issues. I find it difficult if I'm dating somebody new, for example, to say, oh, Dad, I have a boyfriend. And very much with his family, we speak in euphemisms, which I think is really, really common for young LGBT people. So you'll have Christmas or something, or someone will be around for a birthday, and you say, oh, this is my friend. And everyone knows what that means. And sometimes it's worse. Sometimes people will say special friend, which is absolutely terrible. And you kind of, inside, you're just cringing so much. But even in those instances, especially if it's like my grandparents, for example, I try and appreciate that they're from a generation where either these things weren't spoken about at all, or if they were illegal. And so I try and just remember that and be empathetic. And so change their minds in a kind of slow way. And then I hope that the more they get to know a partner of mine, for example, the more they can see it's just like a heterosexual relationship. It's almost the same, apart from the gender, as if I had a girlfriend, you know. We do the same things, we go to the same places. And so that normalizes it for them. And now my nan, who used to use euphemisms like friend and special friend and things like that, she's now able to say boyfriend. And I remember the first time that she referred to a partner that I had as my boyfriend, that was a surprisingly big moment. It felt like I'd really got somewhere, and that she had kind of accepted what that was and had given it validity, so that felt really good. So I worry that young LGBT people don't have enough representation, and they can't see themselves a lot of the time in the media or as, you know, having role models. And that was like definitely the case for me. And I also didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. There were no LGBT youth clubs. We didn't speak about it in school. In fact, I remember that the school I went to, when I was about 14 and hadn't come out, there was another student who was brave enough to come out, and he had a boyfriend, and a local resident complained that they'd seen them be affectionate with each other at the bus stop. And rather than defending their LGBT student, my school actually pulled him into the office and told him off for the complaint that had happened. And I think that those attitudes lead young LGBT people to just try and find themselves in whichever way they can, and often they're in unhealthy ways, and they're on dating apps, which, you know, we all know that young people can access a lot of information before they are supposed to, whether it's joining Facebook before you're 13 or whether it's joining a dating app before you're 16. It can actually be quite dangerous for young LGBT people because they might arrange to meet up with somebody online, and we all know the dangers of that. But when you feel so isolated because you can't see anyone that looks like you or feels like you anywhere else, this one person that wants to meet you from that app might seem like a beacon of hope. That might be your way to connect with somebody. And they're so wanting to have that connection, that it's totally understandable why you would go and meet that person, but that puts young LGBT people at an unnecessary risk that their straight counterparts or allies just wouldn't have to contend with. And I don't think we speak about this enough. And so I think that because of that, it's my opinion that I was forced to grow up faster than my straight peers around me. And I think that a lot of young LGBT people I've spoken to have the same or similar experiences of growing up too fast because we're not given the same representation that heterosexual people are.